Pasquale Cesarano lives in a small town near the Italian city of Naples. He's 32 years old, and like his 28-year-old sister, they are university graduates, a matter of great pride for their parents. And also like his sister, Pasquale lives at home. Despite his higher education, he's unable to get work beyond short-term contracts. He earns on the average about 600 euros a month. Today he's looking for work, and so is his sister Flora, who returned recently from Milan.
I had to take these 3-month contracts from my employer, which was an employment agency, even though this was the very agency that had won a 2-year contract with a national Italian institute. I don't need to tell you the stress I felt at the end of each contract.
At first I felt it was a personal defeat, but when I started looking around and looking at Italy, I saw it wasn't just my failure, but the failure of many young people like me who no longer had the means to stay in Milan or in any other city.
Pasquale and Flora are part of a generation finding it harder to leave the family nest. In the 1980s, some 15% of Italians over 30 years old lived at home. Today, that figure has soared to 40%.
Just a while back, somebody was talking about the bamboccioni, or eternal child who can't cut the umbilical cord with the mother. But how can they work in a job where they can barely earn 500 or 600 euros a month and pay the rent on a flat? They have no choice but to stay at home. Today, Italy's on a cliff edge. At home, there are still the grandparents and the parents. But what will happen to the young, the 28, 30-year-olds, when the grandparents and parents are no longer around? And tomorrow, when they're in their 40s, what will they do then? I don't know.
Like throughout southern Europe, it's Italy's young generation which has been hardest hit by the economic crisis. In 2009 alone, Italians between the ages of 18 and 29 accounted for 79% of overall job losses. But unlike other EU states, a lack of reforms in Italy has left the older generation unscathed, their job and pension security untouched.
Since the crisis, we haven't seen a sharp rise in poverty. And it's because the crisis has mainly affected young people, many of whom still live with their parents. If the crisis had hit the heads of the family, then the situation would have been a lot worse. The problem today is that young generations keep getting hit by the crisis, and it's affecting their future. It's affecting what path they take, their life, and their overall quality of life.
Throughout southern Europe, demonstrations like this one in Naples have become all too familiar. Young people protesting against a system they argue has left them in a precarious situation. A so-called flexible job market, which makes it easy to hire and fire young people, but not older ones. Here we find Pasquale at the demonstration. While most Italians are still at the honeymoon stage with their new prime minister, the concern is that austerity plans to reduce Italy's 1.7 trillion euro sovereign debt could target the wrong people.
From an economic point of view, it's a disaster. When you get tenure, you earn 1,100 euros per month. But it's hard to get tenure. More often than not, you get a short wave of shifts, which means you earn between 600 and 800 euros per month. The type of reforms we've seen from the past governments and now the new government don't look like they'll change our situation. They can't give us any job guarantees, and it's even worse for people at university now. The best they can hope for in the real world is an unsure job market. But given the way they're getting rid of workers at the moment, I think unemployment will be a more likely outcome for the future.
Short-term contracts, an uncertain job market, and it doesn't stop there. Over the past decade, Italy's economy has been at a virtual standstill. A lack of reforms has cut the country's competitive edge. And with the recent change in Italy's political landscape, the dilemma has become clear. Budget and pension cuts have to be introduced to an aging population still reluctant to move over for those in their 30s and 40s.
The situation won't improve if we start targeting workers' rights. We believe it's a mistake to start introducing flexibility at the other end of the job market, meaning retirement. Today, there are 46 different types of ways an employee can be hired. And out of 10 workers today who are hired, 8 of them are in a precarious situation. So we don't think that adding flexibility at the end can help the economy's growth. You can't rebuild a country on precarity and on reducing workers' rights.
Cutting public spending while generating economic growth. This is at the heart of the Eurozone crisis, with Italy now seen as the newest and weakest link. For Italy's industrial leaders, politics has long been the major culprit behind zero growth. For them, the only way is to introduce reforms that will take the noose off companies strangling from an unfair labor market.
Now is
the time to think of our children, to think of the future of our country, knowing that we can only build a future if we introduce and apply the necessary measures. These will probably, in fact, definitely reduce the welfare. The reforms will reduce the benefits which have been guaranteed to us, but they have to be reduced if we want to guarantee a future for our children.
Per I cittadini, ma che possono, se oggi saremo in grado di farlo, garantire il futuro ai nostri figli.
Our parents benefited from this system, and we, my generation especially, I think we have to assume our responsibility.
La mia generazione in particolare credo debba assumersi la responsabilità.
Assuming responsibility. This has been the battle cry for some of Italy's under-40 generation, such as this group of 3 entrepreneurs. Tired of short-term contracts, they set up their own communications agency in Rome just 2 years ago. But despite the long hours and hard work, competition is still tough. The main reason? Companies increasingly using interns instead of hiring new personnel.
Right now, precarity means mainly this: a lack of rules and unfair competition, with companies who don't invest in their personnel, which means they can have these huge structures by not paying the personnel who work there. The policy of using interns has become a new method of exploiting young Italian workers.
Back at home, Pasquale and Flora show us their university diplomas they had framed for their parents as a present. No regrets, they say, just disappointment that reforms, if they come, might be too little, too late.
Amarezza, profonda amarezza, perché
I feel bitter, a profound bitterness, because apart from my own ego, which says I'm also part of this condemned generation, I'm also worried for the future of our country. If we don't invest in the young, we don't invest in the future. Instead of a condemned generation at the end, it's a whole country which is condemned.
A me pare che risulti poi essere condannata un'intera nazione, un intero paese.